"You are very wet, sir, and nobody has taken your coat," said the young woman in the faded gown, "which means my stepmother does not yet know you are in the house. Come into the kitchen before she finds out." Ludovic, 5th Duke of Ombersley, who had been received by 2 archbishops and a queen, followed her down a back passage without correcting a single word of it. He had brought this upon himself. He had ridden ahead of his own carriage because he could not endure another hour of it, and because arriving at 8 o'clock in a crested chaise meant a family drawn up in the hall like infantry, and a mother pushing daughters forward one after another as though he were to choose a hat. So he had come at 6, in the rain, alone, and the boy at the stable had taken his horse for a hired one. And this creature in a gown 20 years out of the fashion had decided he was the Duke's man of business. The kitchen was warm and smelled of onions. She set him on a stool by the range, took his dripping coat with her own hands, and hung it on the rail where the linen dried. "There is soup," she said. "There is always soup. You must not tell his grace we fed his secretary in a kitchen, or mamma will be ill for a fortnight." "His grace," said Ludovic, "is unlikely to ask." "No, I suppose he is not. Great men never ask the useful questions." She ladled soup into an earthenware bowl and gave it to him with a spoon and a heel of bread, and sat down across the scrubbed table with her chin on her hand to watch him eat, as though a stranger eating soup were an event worth attending. "You may as well know what you have walked into, since you will be writing it all down in a book for him afterwards. My father is Mr. Ardley. He is the gentlest man in the county and the worst at money. My stepmother is expecting a duke to fall in love with one of my half-sisters before Michaelmas. My half-sisters are Phoebe and Augusta. Phoebe sings. Augusta has been told she has an interesting profile, and turns it towards people rather often, so you will know her at once. And you?" "I am Carenza," she said. "I am the one who is already here." He looked at her properly then. Nothing about her was fashionable. The gown was a soft washed-out blue, the sleeves cut in a manner no woman had worn since the war, the hem let down, and the crease of the old hem still showing like a scar. Her hair had been pinned up in the dark by someone in a hurry. There was a smudge of ink on the side of her right hand, and a great deal of steady, unhurried intelligence in her face. "You will forgive me for asking," he said. "The gown." "Ah," she looked down at herself without the smallest embarrassment. "It was my mother's. Everything of mine that has been pressed this week has gone into my sister's rooms, on the principle that it would be wasted on me, which is perfectly true, and I was in the still-room until 5:30 because the plums will not wait for dukes, so I put on the first gown my hand found in the press." She smoothed the faded blue over her knee. She was married in it. "It is the only thing in this house that has never been sold, pawned, or turned into something else, and I would rather wear it than anything in Phoebe's room, so pray do not look at me as if I were an orphan in a moral tale." Ludovic ate his soup. He had not been spoken to in that tone since he was 19, and his tutor had thrown a Sophocles at his head. He had come to Ardley Court on business, and the business was this. For 2 years a correspondent had been cataloguing by post the wreck of the Ombersley Library, 9,000 volumes his grandfather had bought by the yard and never opened, and among them, somewhere, a manuscript psalter of some importance that no one could find. The letters that came back had been extraordinary, precise, unsentimental, funny in the margins, with a Greek that shamed his own and a hand as neat as engraving. They were signed K. Ardley. He had come in person to offer the man the post of librarian at 400 a year, a cottage, and the run of the house, chiefly because he had begun to look forward to the letters more than to his own dinner. "Do you help your father in his work?" he asked. The change in her was slight and instant, like a door being held. "I fetch and carry," she said. "Have some more bread." At 8 o'clock the carriage came. He heard it from the kitchen, the wheels, the shouting, the bell, and then the whole house rising into panic overhead like startled pigeons. Carenza Ardley stood up with the ladle still in her hand and listened to it, and Ludovic watched the understanding arrive in her face in 3 distinct stages. "The Duke's carriage," she said. "Yes." "With no Duke in it." "Almost certainly." She set the ladle down very carefully on the table, as though it were made of glass. "Sir," she said, "what is your name?" "Ombersley," he said. For a moment the only sound was the soup. Then she closed her eyes and said, with enormous dignity, "You permitted me to say that my sister turns her profile at people. You said she had been told it was interesting. It was your stepmother who told her. That is not the improvement you appear to think it is." She looked down at the faded blue gown and for the first time at the ink on her hand, and he watched her decide something. She curtsied. It was a very good curtsy, better than half of what he saw in London. "Your Grace, your coat is on the linen rail. If you would be so good as to go up the back stairs and come down the front ones, nobody need ever know, and I shall not have to be spoken to about it for the next 11 years. Miss Ardley." "Please," she said. "The soup was mine to give. The rest of the evening belongs to my mother, and she has waited a long while for it." So the 5th Duke of Ombersley went up the back stairs of a shabby manor house, and came down the front, and was received in the hall by a family drawn up like infantry, and let himself be introduced to Phoebe, who sang, and to Augusta, who turned. And behind them all, in the doorway to the passage, in a washed-out gown with the old hem showing, stood the woman who had fed him. Her stepmother turned and saw her, and something crossed that handsome face, which Ludovic did not care for at all. "That," said Mrs. Ardley brightly, "is Carenza. She keeps the still room. Carenza, you will change your gown." "There is no other gown pressed, mamma." "Then you will dine upstairs." "She will dine with us," said the Duke of Ombersley. The hall went entirely silent. He had used, he realized, the voice he kept for the House of Lords, and it had come out of him without permission. She dined with them, at the foot of the table in the faded blue gown, and said almost nothing. Phoebe sang after the fish. Augusta gave him her profile with the regularity of a lighthouse. Mrs. Ardley described at length the delicacy of her daughter's constitutions, which appeared to be an accomplishment. And Mr. Ardley, a mild, gray, apologetic man, spoke of the weather in the manner of somebody praying it would last all evening. Ludovic put down his glass. "Mr. Ardley, your letter of the 9th of March, the note on the Salisbury Psalter. You wrote that the binding had been cut down in the last century and the wrong arms stamped upon it, and that the true book was therefore probably shelved among the sermons, being now too small to stand with its fellows." The silence at the table acquired a texture. "Did I?" said Mr. Ardley. "You did. It was the cleverest thing anybody has said to me in 2 years. My librarian looked among the sermons. The Psalter was there, behind a life of Bishop Hooper, precisely as you described." Ludovic did not look at the foot of the table. "Would you tell me how you reasoned it?" Mr. Ardley opened his mouth. Nothing came out of it. He was not a liar, that was the difficulty, and to his credit it was plainly a difficulty. "He reasoned it," said Carenza, "because the arms on the binding were 3 martlets, and the family with 3 martlets never owned a psalter, having been fined twice for owning nothing at all. It is in the county history. Anyone might have seen it." "Carenza," said her stepmother, in a voice like a shutting drawer, "the Duke did not address you." "No," said Ludovic. "The Duke has been addressing her since March and did not know it. He asked for the library after dinner, and Mr. Ardley took him there and lit 2 candles, and then stood in the middle of his own room and confessed the whole of it in about 90 seconds. That his eyes had gone at 50, that the hand was his daughter's, that the Greek was his daughter's, that the reasoning had always been his daughter's, and that they had signed the letters K. Ardley, because Kenelm and Carenza began alike, and because no gentleman in England would pay 400 a year for the opinions of a young woman who kept a still-room. "I have been a coward," the old man said. "She would not let me be sorry about it. She said the work was the thing, and that it did not matter whose name went on it." Ludovic stood among the ladders and the dust, and thought about 2 years of letters and a bowl of soup. He found her the next morning in the still-room, sleeves turned back, wax on her fingers, sealing plum preserve into little jars. "Your Grace should not be in here." "The post is yours," he said. 400 a year. The cottage at the park gate, the run of the library, and your name on the catalogue when it is printed." Her hand stopped. "You cannot." "I can. It is my library." "They will say you have taken a young woman into your house and called it scholarship, and my father's name will be laughed at in every drawing-room in the county, and no one will read a single page of the work because of what they will decide about the woman who wrote it." She set the jar down and turned to face him, and her chin was up, and he saw that she had thought this through years ago and had made her peace with it, which was somehow far worse than tears. "I am not too proud to be paid, Your Grace. I am too proud to be pitied. Take the catalogue, print it under my father's name. He has earned it by keeping me." He went away that afternoon. He was very angry, and it took him the whole of the ride to Ombersley to understand that he was not angry with her. He came back in 11 days. He came in the crested chaise with his aunt, the Dowager Lady Farrow, who was 79 and had buried 3 husbands, and did not care what any living creature thought of her, and who had been given her instructions, and was delighted by them. He came with a printer's proof, and a bishop's letter, and a decision. The hall was assembled again. Phoebe had been put into pink. "Mr. Ardley," said Ludovic, "my aunt requires a companion of scholarly habits at 300 a year, and will take your daughter into Ombersley under her own roof and her own name, where every convention will be satisfied and every tongue disappointed. Lady Farrow, do you require a companion?" "Desperately," said his aunt, who had never in her life required anything. "The catalogue goes to press in October under the name that did the work. The Dean of Wellsbury has read the introduction and wishes to correspond with its author. And this," he handed the proof to Mr. Ardley, who took it in both hands like a man being handed a grandchild, "is the title page." Carenza Ardley came down the last 3 stairs. She was in the faded blue gown, because it was morning, and the good gowns lived in her sister's rooms, and there was ink on her hand. "Your Grace has arranged everything," she said unsteadily. "Not everything." He crossed the hall to her, and the whole assembled family might as well have been furniture. "Miss Ardley, the companion's post is genuine, and it is yours, and you may hold it for 40 years, and I shall never once mention this conversation again if that is your wish. But I have ridden here twice in 3 weeks, and I find that I am not doing it for the Psalter." He lowered his voice, and it went nowhere, because a marble hall carries everything. "You gave me soup in a kitchen when you believed I was a clerk. Do you understand what that is worth to a man who has spent 20 years being bowed to? You did not know me, and you were kind to me. Everyone in England knows me, and no one has been kind to me since my mother died. I told you your sister's profile was. You told me the truth in a warm room. Marry me, Carenza, not as a companion, and not as a charity, and not as a librarian, though heaven knows the library needs you more than it needs me. As my wife. Sit at the head of my table and put your name on your own work, and let the county say whatever it likes. I have never once been able to hear it over the sound of my own consequence." Behind him, his aunt said, "Well," with tremendous satisfaction. Carenza Ardley stood on the bottom stair with her hand on the newel post. He watched her look at her father, who was crying quietly over a title page, and at her stepmother, who had gone the color of the wallpaper, and then at him. "I have nothing pressed," she said. "Then wear the gown you were kind to me in." They were married in it, in September, in the small church at Ardley, with the plums coming in. She had the hem let out properly, and a new sash of white ribbon, and the old crease still showed, and the Duke of Ombersley, standing at the rail, considered it the finest thing he had ever seen carried up an aisle. Phoebe sang, and sang well, and was forgiven everything. Augusta was married 2 years later to a man who admired her profile with complete sincerity. The catalogue of the Ombersley Library was printed in October in 2 volumes, and on the title page, in plain letters, it said that the work had been made by Carenza Ardley, with the assistance of her father, Kenelm Ardley, gentleman. The faded blue gown was cleaned, wrapped in linen with lavender, and laid in a cedar chest in the Duchess's dressing-room, and the housekeeper was instructed by the Duke himself that it was not to be altered, cut, or given away at any time, for any reason, by anybody. And on winter nights, in the long gallery of a house with 9,000 books in it, the 5th Duke of Ombersley would sometimes ask his wife to read aloud to him from her own margins, and would listen with his eyes shut, and would think, every single time, of a warm kitchen, an earthenware bowl, and a woman who had not known who he was and had fed him anyway.